Good evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Ellison Barber filling in for Gadi Schwartz, coming to you from New York. Here are some of the stories we are watching tonight. Starting with grand jury testimony from a former aide to Donald Trump who was with him on January 6th. After almost a year's worth of work, is the DOJ special counsel's office ready to charge Trump a second time? Then at least one Republican wants to expunge Donald Trump's impeachments, while another more powerful Republican denies he ever made a deal to get that done. But is such a thing even possible?
I've been pushing hard for expungement, so I've been in a lot of conversations.
North Korea remains silent about that U.S. soldier in their custody, but that soldier's family is now speaking out. And on its face, it sounds like a no-brainer. Cars capable of harnessing energy from the sun. So could the solar automotive age finally be upon us?
Is this the first solar-produced vehicle for market?
It should be the first mass-produced solar electric car, yeah.
Tonight, new developments in the DOJ's probe of the 2020 election meddling and January 6th riots. Today, a former Trump White House aide testified in front of a federal grand jury in Washington, D.C. William Russell was with Trump for most of the day on January 6th. He now works for the Trump presidential campaign. And Russell is not the only Trump aide involved with this investigation. NBC News learning today that former Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani also met with special counsel Jack Smith's team earlier this year here in New York City. Giuliani has not received a target letter, though. That's something Trump says he did receive from the Department of Justice this past Sunday. The letter gave him until today to testify in front of a grand jury, which he did not do. NBC Justice reporter Ryan Riley joins me now. Ryan, William Russell is a name a lot of us have never heard of until today. Who is he, and do we know anything about his testimony?
He's a Trump aide who was with the president for at least part of the day on January 6th. But remember, this investigation is about more than just January 6th. It's about that entire period after the election, and it involves potentially the fake electors scheme. It involves a lot of the fundraising that the Trump campaign had done afterwards, telling their supporters that they were putting all this money into the fight, when in reality a lot of it was just going back to the campaign and eventually involving lining Donald Trump's pocket. So I think that's, he's someone who can give a lot of insight potentially to what the president was thinking, whether or not he actually believed these lies about the 2020 election. Of course, it doesn't actually matter in the end if Donald Trump still actually believed those lies, as long as there's enough evidence that he shouldn't have believed that information, and that he had enough information before him that those to know that those lies were not actually true. So this is someone, obviously, the special counsel has shown us a lot of interest in, just given that this has been multiple times of him coming in to the grand jury at this point to talk about his experiences during that critical period leading up to January 6th.
Do we have any insight into the timing of his testimony? Was he called before or after Trump received that target letter?
I think just based on before. We know that, they have to give a certain amount of warning before people have to come in. So this was known before all of that. And we also know that because the fact that his lawyer, Stan Woodward, was actually in trial last week, and that verdict came back. And there's this really interesting moment that happened in court today, and a lot of sort of courtroom drama. So Stanley Woodward is representing Walt Nauta, who's that aide, of course, in the Mar-a-Lago case. But he's also representing a number of people in Trump world. And sort of separately, he's representing a former Trump administration official who actually physically stormed the Capitol on January 6th. This was an individual who went to a bench trial last week, and the verdict came back today. And we had this moment where Stanley Woodward was 25 minutes late for that hearing that he was supposed to be in at 2 p.m. And he showed up to court and had to explain to the judge, and he asked to, talk to the judge on the side at first. And the judge had him instead explain it publicly and say that there was this grand jury matter that was taking up a lot of time, and it got into questions of executive privilege. And basically, then after that, the judge in that case actually called down the special prosecutor from the special counsel's office to explain exactly what happened, because Stanley Woodward was under the impression that he was going to be able to be released, and they weren't going to continue questioning him because he had this prior commitment elsewhere in the courtroom to get this verdict in this separate case. So a lot of sort of drama with another judge pulling down prosecutors from the grand jury room during this proceeding. And, ultimately, I'm not sure if that will end up delaying, or if there were plans to try to vote on an indictment today, or if that was going to be something that's going to cause delay, or if they're going to have to bring him back again to finish his testimony at some other point.
All right, Ryan Riley, we will check back in with you when we figure all of that out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Over on Capitol Hill, lawmakers spent all day responding to new reporting that House Speaker Kevin McCarthy promised to hold a vote to expunge Trump's 2 impeachments. Apparently, the former president had been upset that McCarthy hadn't endorsed his 2024 presidential campaign, so this deal was reportedly put on the table to try and smooth over that relationship. But McCarthy tells NBC News that no such deal exists.
There's no deal, but I've been very clear from long before when I voted against impeachments that they put in for purely political purposes. I support expungement, but there's no deal out there.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins me now. Danny, let's just talk about this idea of expungement. How would that even work? I mean, the 2 impeachment votes, they exist in the congressional record. Can Congress legally go back and just wipe something from the congressional record?
You have seized on the philosophical paradox of expungements.
Yeah.
I handle a lot of expungements. They're typically created by statute, and they're for low-level crimes, depending on the state. They're a creature of state law. But basically, your question is exactly the problem of expungements. If you erase a record, how do you prove or even know that it ever happened? And this is a common thing when people get a DUI expunged, for example. They go through life wondering, well, technically the record may still be out there. Can I say I've been arrested or have I not been arrested? Now, in this case, there's probably not an option for expungement because expungements are usually created by law. A specific law allows you to expunge a record. But in this case, it's a creative idea. Maybe the House can vote for it. It doesn't matter. It's still going to exist in the congressional record, whether or not they vote for it.
Yeah, so there were 2 pieces of legislation introduced by House Republicans, one by Marjorie Taylor Greene, another by Elise Stefanik, that were about this idea of clearing the record, right? Even if it passed through the House, there is no way that would get through the Democrat-controlled Senate. They haven't had a vote on it just yet. But if there is this scenario, this universe where, say, the House passes one of those resolutions, doesn't move in the Senate, are there legal avenues that Congress could take to then still try and do this, since this is something that usually happens in court?
Impeachment exists by virtue of the Constitution. The Constitution has nothing about expungement procedures. Only expungements are allowed, it appears, in American law where they are provided for by statute. The Constitution doesn't speak to expungement. So the House can vote on it. They can agree on it. They can vote on it 100% in favor of expunging the record. But if they can't do it, they can't do it. And you bring up another good point. This procedure existed in the Senate as well. That's where the trial was held. So it doesn't matter if the House even could expunge its record. The House has no control over the Senate. They can't expunge the trial and the record of the trial in the Senate House. Look, this is a very creative idea. I love it as a criminal defense attorney. I file expungement petitions all the time. They are great for people who are trying to get rid of a DUI on their record. But this is not a DUI on someone's record. This is a constitutional impeachment procedure which exists for posterity, for history. You don't want to try and expunge it.
I feel like we're in a legal class right now. But while I have you, I have to ask, when you mentioned the role of the House and the Senate in impeachment and how it's described in the Constitution, those provisions there, I think that's the only place in the Constitution where they use the term sole, to say the sole responsibility for impeachment, for the trial, the House and the Senate. The Supreme Court notoriously is not involved, other than the Chief Justice acting as a figurehead to preside over the trial, right? Is there a world where with expungement, since it's not mentioned in the Constitution, the Supreme Court could be brought into all of this?
No, I think that would be a separation of powers issue. I mean, the Constitution is based on the idea that the Supreme Court can't interfere with Congress. Congress can't interfere with the executive. They have checks and balances. But just like you said, when it comes to impeachment, there is no question but that exists as a creature of Congress. It is a trial that goes on in the congressional bodies, in the House and then in the Senate. The House accuses, the Senate tries. The president cannot pardon himself, and there has never been an option for going to the Supreme Court, to the judiciary, with any part of an impeachment proceeding. The most confusing thing about impeachment is that it looks like a judicial trial. That's just cosmetic. It is a creature entirely of Congress, created by the Constitution, existing only in the houses of Congress, and therefore the judiciary can have virtually no control over it other than the symbolic presiding over a presidential impeachment by the Chief Justice. But that, again, is symbolic only. Probably more confusing than anything else.
All right, Danny Savalas, thank you so much for breaking that down. We appreciate it. Tonight, we're learning more about the detained American soldier in North Korea. We're hearing from the family of Travis King, who says his behavior is completely out of character. His uncle said he has been grieving the death of his young cousin since February.
I think his problem is that he needs help. You know, that's not Travis.
Out of his character, I've never seen him get down like that ever.
So something must
So
be.
something is going on. Yeah.
This isn't him.
It's not his personality.
For more, I'm joined by NBC's Matt Bradley. Matt?
Yes, we just got some troubling new details about the events that led up to this young private's mad dash across the border into North Korea. Now, we knew that he was implicated, or at least had been detained or accused of at least one, possibly two, different assaults at two different nightclubs or bars. Now, we also know that he was serving detention in a South Korean prison while he was working, or while he was enlisted in the U.S. military here in South Korea. Now, he decided to spend 48 days, and right after that was when he decided to make his mad dash across the border. Now, what that was not a separate, yet another third assault. It turns out that he was deciding, he made a choice to go to prison and spend 48 days there in lieu of paying a fine for damaging a police car. And that was an altercation that occurred while he was being detained by police during one of those two previous assaults. So basically, this young man decided that instead of paying the $5,000 fine, he would do what some South Koreans are able to do, which is to spend 48 days in prison, essentially doing labor. And once he was released on July 10th, that was when, a week later, he joined a guided tour, went to the border, and decided to make that very treacherous move across the border, one that has now exploded into an international diplomatic crisis. Now, we've also heard from U.S. officials today. My colleague, Courtney Kuby, interviewed the Secretary of the Army, and she said that it turns out that the United States has had no real direct contact with anyone in North Korea, despite efforts to try to contact the North Koreans through the United Nations, through the South Koreans, and through the Swedish embassy in Pyongyang. Now, the fact is that we're not going to know anything more about the fate of this young soldier, Private Travis King, before we hear from the North Koreans. And right now, the overwhelming sound we're hearing from North Korea is silence on this troubling matter.
NBC's Matt Bradley in South Korea. Thank you. We are learning more about those hectic days last winter when a suspected Chinese spy balloon floated across the country. It sparked headlines for days and concerns if more were to come. NBC Nightly News anchor Lester Holt traveled to the North American Air Defense Command headquarters in Colorado, or NORAD for short, to get a bit of a behind-the-scenes look and try and find out how they decided when to shoot that balloon down.
9 degrees south, longitude 181.
We were granted rare access inside NORAD's Joint Operations Center, where potential air and maritime threats to the U.S. and Canada are tracked and analyzed.
We're just checking his origin, and we get that from FAA.
Whether a civilian plane entering restricted airspace, as in this exercise, a ballistic missile launch, an unwelcome visitor over the Arctic, or a high-altitude balloon.
You believe 100% it was a Chinese spy vehicle? Absolutely. It was a Chinese spy balloon.
Nearly 6 months after the balloon drama that captivated the country, NORAD Commander General Glenn Van Herk sat down with me to talk about the decision-making that led to the balloon's ultimate destruction. It was set in motion days earlier in a high-stakes mission to intercept it over Alaska.
We sent a package that included F-22s and F-16s, along with a support package of a E-3 AWACS aircraft with tanker support.
Did you know what its mission was?
We had worked with the intelligence community, and we had a good idea of what the mission actually was going to be. Once we intercepted the high-altitude balloon just off the coast of Alaska, I made the assessment that it didn't demonstrate hostile intent.
The balloon briefly sailed over Canada and then back into the U.S. and toward sensitive military sites.
There was obviously a great political debate over the timing of the shoot down. From your military perspective, did things go in the order they should have?
The president directed us to shoot it down safely, and we shot it down safely at the place and time of our choosing.
He gave you the discretion to decide where that safe place was?
We decided, based on his direction, when to shoot it down.
The balloon was shot down off the South Carolina coast.
They just shot it.
But not before the military says it collected its share of intel, too.
What I would stress to you, Lester, is that this turned out, I think, the best it could for our nation. We know that no American people were injured. We maintained the safety. We know for a fact that we mitigated their collection and we maximized our collection.
The balloon episode, a far cry from the Cold War image of NORAD when the threat of a Soviet nuclear strike was the primary concern. Its iconic command post burrowed deep inside Colorado's Cheyenne Mountain and depicted in the movie War Games, now an alternate joint ops center with U.S. and Canadian operators standing watch.
It's daunting. It's a little bit high stress. It's a very busy environment, but we train to that.
This mountain complex was engineered to withstand a direct nuclear attack, and integral to that are a series of blast doors, 3 feet thick. The last time they were closed operationally was on 9/11.
It's all self-sustained with internal water, electricity, and food.
The Chinese balloon was determined not to be hostile, but it joins a list of growing threats, from hypersonic missiles to cyber, that NORAD is racing to stay ahead of.
Are you able to see the things that you need to be seeing right now in terms of potential threats?
Well, I would say that I can't see everything that I would like to see as far away from the homeland as we need to see it.
He's asked Congress for more over-the-horizon radar. And why it all matters? A memorial to 9/11 that sits outside NORAD headquarters provides the answer.
Everybody that comes in walks past this and reminds us of our solemn duty of defending our homeland.
Lester Holt, thank you. Still to come, the dangerous heat blanketing parts of the country just won't seem to go away. A look at how people are desperately trying to stay cool and safe.
It's brutal. And it's not only the heat, it's the humidity and the mugginess, and it's so uncomfortable.
Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. testified on Capitol Hill today to a Republican-led committee on censorship. Democrats on the committee used their time to challenge his vaccine skepticism. Here's some of what he said.
You know, I'll just say this one thing. Trusting the experts is not a function of science. It's not a function of democracy. It's a function of religion and totalitarianism, and it does not make for a healthier population.
RFK Jr. is hoping to snag the Democratic presidential nomination. Florida's Board of Education just changed how the state will teach Black history. Among these new guidelines are lessons on how Black Americans benefited from slavery. Teachers spoke out against these changes at a meeting last night.
Our students deserve to be equipped with a comprehensive understanding of our nation's past, even if the history is unpleasant.
And New York City will pay $13 million to settle a civil rights lawsuit. This is related to the police response to Black Lives Matter protest back in 2020. The lawsuit was brought on behalf of 1,300 people who were arrested or beaten by police during the demonstrations that took place after the murder of George Floyd. At least 11 horses have died in a sweeping Mustang roundup in Nevada. Some of these horses died after breaking their necks and legs. This is part of a larger federal campaign to wrangle wild horses on federal lands. And we now know why Las Vegas police searched a home connected to the murder of Tupac Shakur. They searched the home of a 60-year-old man named Dwayne Keith Davis, who says he was in the car when the rapper was killed in a drive-by shooting back in 1996. The warrant says he belonged to the Southside Compton Crips street gang. We're following some breaking news out of Phoenix, Arizona, where a large fire is burning right now. It is burning just north of the Sky Harbor Airport. Airport officials say right now their operations are not being impacted by the fire. But you look at these startling images as those smoke plumes just billow over the sky. It seems to be in an area that is an industrial area near where a propane service operates. Remember the context of what's happening here. This is an area that is in the middle of a deadly heat wave. That means firefighters will be responding to this in temperatures over 110 degrees. It is actually so hot there right now that the news helicopter taking these videos had to turn back and land. We're going to stay on this and we'll bring you any updates we learn over the course of the next hour. All right, people in North Carolina are picking up the pieces after a huge tornado blew through that area. You can also see a tornado pass through someone's yard in a North Carolina city. The winds tore the roof right off of the home. Then the storm whipped up debris and just spread it all around that yard. Winds ripped the roof off of a Pfizer plant, scattering around pallets of medicine. There are fears that it could lead to shortages. Hailstorms barreling over Rice Lake, Wisconsin yesterday caused a scary scene inside a Walmart. Glass and pieces of the roof fell into the store itself. You can see the hail and rain falling in as people found shelter. These storms also dumped torrential rains across the South. Kentucky is still under a state of emergency after widespread flash flooding. The hardest hit area was Mayfield, where nearly a foot of rain fell just yesterday.
21, December 10th, was the tornado, and it blew my job completely apart. And I've not been able to get back to that job ever since. And it's been really devastating.
Many of the people recovering from these storms are also dealing with scorching heat. Remember, over 100 million people across the country are under some kind of heat alert. That's just today. At Death Valley National Park, it has turned potentially deadly. A 71-year-old man collapsed at Golden Canyon on Tuesday, where temperatures hit 121 degrees. If the coroner rules his death is heat-related, it will be the second one at the park this summer. In Maricopa County, Arizona, at least 18 people have died from the heat. As many as 69 more deaths are being investigated. Parts of Florida are passing temperature records. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra has more on how people are handling this heat in Coral Gables.
Hey, listen, yeah, at this point, I feel like a broken record talking about all the broken records when it comes to heat. This is not just here in Florida. This is all across the South, as we've talked about, that heat dome really laying it on thick. Not just here over in the Southeast, but also in the Southwest. Two very different types of heat, but hey, heat is heat, right? So in Phoenix, we saw the record broken for most amount of consecutive days of temps above 110, either at or above 110. And we're talking about just straight temperature, not the heat index. And then here, over where we are in the Miami area, we saw a record broken in terms of how many days straight of the heat index in the triple digits. And remember, this isn't just impacting humans, and we'll get to that impact in just a moment, but this is also impacting the animals, the ones outside, our furry friends that we keep with us. Either way, everyone having to take precautions to stay safe.
Try to protect them because we can take care of ourselves, but they can't take care of themselves. So we have to do the best we can for them.
And we've talked about how it's not just uncomfortable. This is dangerous and it is deadly. We've seen the deaths out in the Southwest. We've seen it in Death Valley. We've seen it in Arizona. In terms of people getting third-degree burns, ERs filling up with people who have critically high internal body temperatures who get third-degree burns from the asphalt, as well as getting heat stroke, heat illness. But then over here in Florida, we know that a woman was just arrested and charged in northern Florida for leaving an infant inside of a hot vehicle, inside of a garage, That vehicle had a temperature of 133 degrees, that infant 110. So it is so important to remember that when it comes to extreme weather, it can be deceiving, but heat is actually the deadliest form of extreme weather. So we know a lot of cooling shelters open throughout the South to give people access to air conditioning who may not have it otherwise. Ellison?
Marissa, thank you. Coming up, it is supposed to be a happy meal, but now McDonald's is paying up after hot McNuggets burned a small child. But first, you gotta see this, a rabbit rampage in Florida. You see their fuzzy little selves right there? All right, so there's a suburb that has been just overrun by these cute little lion head rabbits. They're an invasive species let loose by a backyard breeder who moved away. Neighbors estimate there are somewhere between 60 to 100 of these fuzzy little guys. While adorable, they are apparently very destructive. They pass their time digging holes in lawns, chewing through wiring, and sitting in traffic. And they just keep on breeding. Residents are raising money for a rescue effort to capture, neuter, and find adoptive homes for the domesticated bunnies. But the cost for all of that could be up to $40,000. Until then, they'll keep hopping away. Maybe we get a new mascot for Stay Tuned Now. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. A federal grand jury heard testimony today from former Trump aide William Russell, who was with the former president on January 6th. The U.S. soldier who bolted across the border into North Korea spent 48 days in a South Korea prison after allegedly failing to pay a fine for property damage. And over 100 million Americans are under some sort of heat alert, and officials in Death Valley suspect the death of a 71-year-old man is related to the heat. Temperatures there passed 120 degrees. You do not expect a trip to McDonald's to end with a second-degree burn from a chicken nugget. You also may not have expected that incident to have ended in a jury awarding that little girl and her family $800,000 in damages. Here's that story, but first we want to warn you there are images of the child's injury that you may find disturbing. A Happy Meal now costing McDonald's $800,000 after a Miami area jury awarded the massive sum to the family of a child who was severely burnt by a chicken nugget.
I'm actually just happy that, they listened to Olivia's voice and the jury was able to decide a fair judgment. I'm happy with that.
Video from 2019 shows then 4-year-old Olivia Caraballo in the back seat of her mother's car as they left the McDonald's drive-thru when a nugget fell on her leg. Olivia's mother describing the horror to NBC South Florida station when they first filed the lawsuit 4 years ago.
I hear a scream and I turn around and it's my daughter, and wedged in between the seatbelt, because it's like a 5-point harness there, is a chicken nugget that I wasn't able to reach.
Those screams playing out in court for the jury. At a trial in May, lawyers for Olivia's family argued the temperature of the nugget was above 200 degrees, but the defense said it was not more than 160 degrees. The jury delivering a split verdict finding McDonald's and Upchurch Foods failed to put warnings on the food, but were not negligent for causing the burns.
Last week, July 10th of this year, the scar is still there.
As for Olivia, 4 years later, she still has a scar on her leg. Neither McDonald's nor Upchurch Foods has responded to our request for comment. But in court, one of their attorneys argued that the child did not suffer long-term injuries.
Olivia is not disabled as a result of this incident. The scar itself doesn't prevent Olivia from going about her day-to-day activities.
This is not the first time McDonald's has faced legal action over burns from their products.
McDonald's will appeal a big verdict in the case of the spilled coffee.
In the 1990s, one case made international headlines when 79-year-old Stella Liebeck suffered third-degree burns and spent 3 weeks in the hospital after a McDonald's hot coffee spilled on her lap.
I screamed. Not realizing I was burned that bad, I knew I was in terrible pain.
She originally requested $20,000 to cover medical bills, but the case went to a trial, and a New Mexico jury awarded her $2.7 million. So the temperature of the McNugget was debated back and forth in this case, and McDonald's argued in part that they are required to cook chicken nuggets at 160 degrees to prevent salmonella. Obviously, a jury did not agree with them. Big changes tonight in Washington, D.C. sports. NFL owners voting unanimously to approve the sale of the Washington Commanders. The team is being sold to a group led by billionaire Josh Harris. Five-time NBA champion Magic Johnson is also going to be part of the ownership of that team as part of this deal. Harris is calling all of it a new era for Washington football.
This franchise is part of who I am and who I've become as a person. But being a fan is not enough. To be successful, we understand that we need to win championships, create a positive impact on the community. A new era of Washington football is here. It's time to get to work.
The group is taking over from owner Dan Snyder for a little over $6 billion. Snyder himself was fined $60 million. A league investigation found that the team withheld revenue it was supposed to share with other teams. Investigators also found Snyder sexually harassed a former team employee. NBC Sports host and reporter Corey Robinson joins me now. Corey, so let's talk about how this sale itself came to be. I mean, the Snyder era was pretty rocky for DC football fans.
They haven't won a playoff game since 2005, so yeah.
Yes, rocky. It's been, it was what, they did playoffs, I think 6 playoff appearances in 24 seasons, no Super Bowl appearances. So there's been all that. Then there's also been all of these allegations of toxic workplace environment, sexual harassment. Yeah. A whole lot of stuff. So how did the deal come to be?
You know, it's interesting. Dan Snyder said he would never sell the team. He actually made several vows throughout his tenureship. One that they would never change the name. Obviously, they changed the name. Other one that he would never sell the team. And then shortly after he said that, of course, this became a distressed asset sale that then recorded a record sale for the NFL. And that's kind of what I'm just so flabbergasted about. We're talking federal investigations, local investigations. The NFL had an investigation. Everyone's investigating this team for financial misconduct, sexual harassment and workplace, just a toxic workplace environment and a culture of fear, one of the reports said, and yet $6 billion. It's flabbergasting. I have no idea how this is happening.
Where does it go from here for sports fans? I mean, now we have a little more details about this investigation into Dan Snyder, this specific one related to one particular incident. But there was a time, right, when he testified even before the U.S. Congress because they had questions over what they were and were not telling D.C. sports fans about toxic workplace culture. I know this is part of the issue, I think, why. So that first fine that you mentioned, $10 million, and that was because of the attorney Beth Wilkinson in the NFL-led investigation back in 2021. That was then a record. Now we're talking $60 million fine. Obviously, that's dwarfed by the $6 billion price tag, but in league precedent, a 6x fine, that was this is a new record in a big way. So obviously the league is trying to send a statement as much as they can here. But one of the big issues was that he was not willing to cooperate, Dan Snyder was. I mean, so it took him a year to sit down with Mary Jo White, the former SEC chair, for an interview. And he only said, we're only going to talk for an hour. So, I mean, this is a report that had 44 witnesses, over 10,000 documents. And then the main person you want to talk to, he said, OK, we're going to limit it to an hour. And it's going to take me a year of kind of working around to get there. That was a big part of this as well. So for sports fans in the Washington area who are maybe happy to finally see this day come where the Snyder era ends, do they have a lot to look forward to? I think it's a very low bar. So I think the answer is yes. However, I always think in tandem. So Harris also owns the 76ers, and I don't know if you've been following that. I mean, James Harden wants out, Joel Embiid's thinking about maybe coming out, and that has been a fiasco. So I don't know exactly if this is going to be a good thing as far as football is concerned, considering the other holdings he has. But I mean, it's baby steps. It's a start in the right direction. I think that league overall is thrilled by this because now one of the most valuable franchises has new life, and it's good for the NFL if the Washington team is good, and that's just Football 101, it's sports 101. So I think overall there's a lot of optimism. All right. Corey Robinson, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Comic-Con is officially underway in San Diego, but with Hollywood on strike, it returns without a lot of star power that it's usually accustomed to. Thousands of people show up every year to attend panels with some of their favorite stars, but because of the strike, actors are not allowed to promote their work. Instead, they're picketing across the country. Today in Philadelphia, members of the actors and writers unions rallied for fair pay and labor protections.
80% of our union is made up of plain old ordinary people trying to make a living.
But for stage actors, the show will go on, at least for the time being. A tentative deal has stopped a potential stage worker strike, which could have shut down nearly 30 shows in New York City and a number of touring shows across the country. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Comic-Con. Jay, Comic-Con has had a pretty rocky couple of years, right? First, they had the pandemic, couldn't really take place in the ways that it was supposed to. Now there are these strikes. How are the strikes impacting this year's convention?
Yeah, look, frustrating, obviously, for Comic-Con, the people who put it on, and for some of those who gather here. But I want to give you a look at the opening session here inside the convention center in San Diego. It's done nothing to stray the crowd. This place is packed. There are people that are still waiting to come in, and it will be. What a lot of the veterans of Comic-Con are saying is that it's their chance to kind of get back to what this festival was before all of the Hollywood stars showed up. Now, yeah, those panels with the big names and the writers, they've all been a big draw over the last few years, and people will miss that. But what really brings them here is first the merchandise, obviously, and all of the memorabilia. Then you've just got the bond between a lot of like-minded people who love seeing each other every year. For some, this is the highlight of their year. They see a friend, an acquaintance, one time in the year, and it's here at Comic-Con. So they're all looking forward to that, and it should be a lot of fun. And I've got to tell you, this is my first Comic-Con. There is so much to see here. There is so much to, well, I guess you could say, phone home about. And the truth is, the crowds, this is day one, they're going to grow over the next 4 days, which I guess in theory is a good idea because, well, Ellis, and the world just doesn't have enough heroes right now. Back to you, Wonder Woman.
But, Jay, we have you, and nothing better. You are our hero tonight, and I hope someone takes a million selfies next to that life-size E.T. Jay Gray, thank you.
Yes.
All right, still ahead. We've got a lot of news to get to. There are wildfires ripping through Greece right now as temperatures there linger in triple digits. We're going to take a look at the fight to try and contain those fires. That's next, so stay tuned. Let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. Ukrainian troops have begun to use the cluster munitions that the United States provided to them about a week ago. The cluster munitions work by enabling the Ukrainians to spread bomblets across large areas with fewer rounds of ammunition. John Kirby at the National Security Council says they are having an impact on the counteroffensive against Russia. Thousands of Peruvians took to the streets this week to protest widespread poverty and inequality and call for President Dina Boluarte to resign. Many Peruvians accuse Boluarte of illegitimately removing her predecessor and throwing him in jail. Shakira, the Latin pop icon, is accused of tax fraud in Spain for the second time, this time for alleged financial crimes from 2018. She's already facing trial for alleged tax evasion from 2012 to 2014. A lioness is suspected to be on the loose in Berlin. German police are using all kinds of methods to try and track her down. Drones, hunters, infrared cameras, even a vet. And they're urging residents to stay indoors. It's not clear yet where she came from. For days, we've been telling you about the heat wave engulfing Europe. Well, that heat wave has led to massive wildfires in Greece that firefighters are struggling to contain. NBC's Josh Letterman has the latest.
Just when temperatures here in Greece were finally starting to come down, a brand new heat wave starting today, with temperatures in the area expected to hit about 113 degrees come Sunday. Here at the Acropolis in Athens, workers have started going on strike for part of the day, saying they simply refuse to work in temperatures that are getting quite that hot. And across this country, there are wildfires that have been raging for days now. Firefighters scrambling to get control over dozens of fires that have been burning not only on the Greek mainland, but also on many Greek islands. We've seen the European Union sending in resources to help, France and Italy sending in firefighting aircraft to try to assist the firefighters here who say that they're really dealing with a combination of extreme weather elements that have pushed their firefighting system to the brink, that are more than what they are able to handle as we're seeing this extreme heat take effect really across the globe. What we're seeing here in Greece has not only already devastated homes and cars, forced thousands of people to evacuate their homes as well as resort towns, but we're seeing a similar situation play out really across southern Europe as this heat wave just continues to drag on. In Spain, a 42-year-old man now reported to be dead due to the heat. And in Italy, 23 out of their 27 biggest cities now under red alert. Italian authorities now urging people to stay indoors, saying the elderly, young people, and those with pre-existing conditions are particularly vulnerable given this ongoing extreme heat.
NBC's Josh Letterman, thank you. The Women's World Cup, which is being co-hosted by New Zealand and Australia, has officially kicked off. Do you see what we did there? And in New Zealand, they won a game after 15 failed World Cup attempts. They beat Norway 1-0. Team USA, our favorite here, they are looking for a three-peat championship title and are set to take on Vietnam tomorrow. NBC's Molly Hunter has more from Sydney.
It's the biggest women's sporting event in the world, and today New Zealand's beauty and culture on full display, welcoming 32 nations, including the #1 ranked U.S. women's national team, to both New Zealand and Australia for the Women's 2023 FIFA World Cup. But here in Auckland, the fanfare interrupted this morning by a rare and deadly shooting incident, locking down parts of the city and closing the fan zone on opening day. But the first match is kicking off as planned. New Zealand beating Norway here at home at Eden Park in Auckland.
Along with Sydney, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand is the other main host city. It's also the home for the U.S. women's national team over the next couple weeks as they fight through the group round to defend their title.
The Americans are looking for a record-setting three-peat led by co-captain Alex Morgan.
We do set expectations for ourselves. We do want to find ourselves at the end. We do want to be hoisting the trophy at the end. To get there is a long way.
The 23-person roster, which of course includes veteran Megan Rapinoe, who announced her retirement following the tournament, but also 14 players who have never been to a World Cup, including star forward Sophia Smith.
We are obviously honoring what this team has done in the past, while at the same time recognizing this is a new team. This is the first World Cup that this team will win.
And cheering them on here is second gentleman Doug Emhoff.
I talked to the vice president this morning. She's like, say hi to everyone.
Morgan and her co-captain Lindsay Horan presenting Emhoff with a jersey of his own. And despite all the pressure, Morgan says they're laser focused on their first game.
So all of our attention is on Vietnam right now and how we can work together as a team to succeed in that.
Molly Hunter, NBC News.
Even if you didn't realize, AI might be watching you. New York is even using surveillance software to catch people who are jumping the turnstiles and riding the subway for free. But first, I am sorry you did not wake up a billionaire, but someone in California did. The winning Powerball ticket worth just over $1 billion was sold at a market in downtown Los Angeles. The lump sum cash value is worth $558 million. That's before taxes. This is the third largest Powerball jackpot ever. So congratulations to the lucky winner, whoever you are. And if you're looking for a new best friend, call me. We'll be right back.
We're standing here today wondering if the person who bought the ticket even realizes it yet.
In tonight's Future of Everything, we're not just talking about AI, but how it is impacting public transportation. If you live in a city with public transit, you've probably seen someone hopping over the gates, over the turnstiles to get in for free, or just slipping on the back of a bus and not paying for their ride, right? According to documents obtained by NBC News, New York City has quietly implemented a surveillance software in a handful of subway stations. The technology uses artificial intelligence to spot riders who are evading fares, which has critics raising a lot of concerns about privacy and over-policing. NBC reporter Kevin Collier joins us now to talk more about this exclusive report. Kevin, break this down. How exactly does this work?
So it's an AI software that integrates with existing surveillance cameras that already are in the New York subway stations. The cameras watch over subway turnstiles and emergency exits. And so the software will automatically flag when it thinks it sees someone evading fare, like somebody's jumping up the turnstile, two people doubling up as they go through, or somebody going through an open emergency exit.
So MTA says that they're using this to just count how much money they're losing and not to actually track down people who are evading fares. But do they have the capability to eventually do that? Is that sort of the plan moving forward?
So the company that we found develops the software. It's a small Spanish surveillance tech firm called Await. They actually market their products as a way to flag station agents to stop individuals who have skipped fares. So the NYPD refused to comment for their plans for this story. And the MTA told me that they're just flagging law enforcement now, but they've declined to say whether that will be the case indefinitely for the future, what their future plans are with it.
So what's the message tonight for people who are really concerned about this and who have privacy worries and they feel like this is more Big Brother, too much surveillance? What else are you hearing from critics, and what should they know tonight?
Well, I think it's interesting. The NYPD no longer arrests subway evaders by default. If they stop someone who's evaded a fare, usually they'll just ticket them, or if they have an existing warrant or other things out, then they may move to arrest. But that was a concerted change because there's a long kind of racist history of subway fare evasion enforcement. The civil liberties and social justice folks I spoke to for this story really stressed that most people who skip subway turnstiles are poor and often qualify for free or reduced rides anyway. And so they've kind of questioned the wisdom of putting substantial money into programs like this that would, in theory, just kind of flag lost fares.
Really interesting stuff. Kevin Collier, thank you so much. In the rush to reduce carbon emissions for a younger, more eco-conscious market, car companies are using new tech to take bigger risks. But there's one company gearing up to make a bold new leap by harnessing the galaxy's oldest power source. NBC's Steve Patterson explains.
Automakers across the world are racing to produce a future free of fossil fuels. But the electric car of tomorrow is anything but traditional.
This is the future.
Meet the Aptera, a three-wheeled electric vehicle that can run on the power of the sun.
Is this the first solar-produced vehicle for market? It should be the first mass-produced solar electric car, yeah.
The California-based company joins other international solar car startups in the race to create a vehicle charged by the generator in the sky. The car is technically classified as an autocycle and designed to be as efficient as possible.
You get rid of the weight, you get rid of the extra rolling resistance, it becomes more aerodynamically streamlined.
It's covered in solar cells that capture the sun's energy, delivering miles worth of power without needing to be plugged in. The company is hoping to start production next year at a price point below $40,000.
We have 44,000 orders for this. We're not even in production.
We took it for a test drive near San Diego.
So in the most perfect conditions, like on a day like today, Aptera projects you could get 40 miles just from the sun alone. If that bears out, that means that most commuters will never have to plug this in.
Our test model had some obvious flaws, and it could barely make it uphill without overheating.
Yeah, we're slowing it down again.
I think you're the first person to ever drive this on a hill.
While there are limitations, experts envision solar EV could change the way we think about transportation, putting less stress on the power grid and utilizing free energy.
You don't have to pay the billions and billions of dollars of grid enhancements you would need to charge all those electric vehicles.
A dream of a gasless world, betting big on the power of the sun. Steve Patterson, NBC News.
It is not just heat that has experts worried lately. Poor air quality has many on edge as well. A recent study finds that exposure to high temperatures and poor air quality together actually increases the risk of early death. NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards has more.
Nearly a third of the U.S. population living in areas with heat advisories. Today, it was 128. But pair these record-breaking heat waves with record-setting wildfires in Canada. At one point, New York City with the worst air quality in the world.
Outside right now, a picture that is simply otherworldly.
It's making many Americans struggle to catch their breath.
It's definitely a point of concern to have a combination of poor air quality and intense heat.
The risk of early death increases by 21% on days with extreme heat and air pollution, according to a 2022 study. So what exactly happens to your body when it's hit with both? Besides dehydration, heat takes a toll on your heart. Blood vessels get smaller and decrease the flow of oxygenated blood to your tissues and organs. To compensate, your heart starts beating faster, pushing your blood pressure up. Add in poor air quality.
There's a heat dome effect. There's less movement of the air out of the system.
Take your respiratory system, for example. Your respiratory mucosal cells line your airways. Normally, they make a barrier protecting the body from inhaling toxins. As the air gets more polluted, your body's ability to regenerate that protective barrier simply can't keep up. And wildfire smoke with particles smaller than a speck of dust can easily get through your respiratory system.
It can get trapped and not come out. And that's where it can get absorbed into your body and cause more havoc in the system.
So what can you do to protect yourself? Drink water, wear lightweight, loose-fitting clothes, try to avoid physical activity in the middle of the day, and keep track of the air quality.
It is certainly going to affect all of us, whether we have an underlying diagnosis or not.
Erica Edwards, NBC News.
That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We'll see you tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.